At 8 o'clock in the morning. I will be there. Sometimes Ryan is there. Sometimes the chief is there. Let's see. Okay, that's kind of it. So I guess, did we do a roll call yet?
We have not yet.
Okay, let's.
Now, let me get starting. Okay, so we should be live on site now, and we should be good. I'm sorry for that. My bad. Okay. Jackie Whitson.
Here.
Gary Tendon. Ellen Fonte.
Here.
Katie Schwer. Auden Schindler.
Here.
Jennifer Riffle.
Present.
Ryan Slack. Great. Our first item is Students of the Month, but I have this sinking feeling that maybe, yes.
I'm one of their teachers, and I just talked to them, and they're on their way.
Oh,
So I
okay.
don't know if we're able to do it later when they get here. or-
Sure. Yeah, we're not in the middle of like a big one. Like, we'll go slow.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We thought it was probably our end.
Manager's update.
I can do a very long one.
That's a good
Did
idea.
you, so you did get notice?
About teacher, or about student.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
they should have been notified, and I'm not sure if they forgot or what exactly.
Okay, I'm trying to clarify that it wasn't on our end.
I don't think it is, and they are
Okay.
Spanish speaking, and I have the Spanish part written up that I'm happy to help you all
Well,
read
that's great.
if you would like, so
Okay.
that they can understand.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. I have
Awesome.
Thank you. I have one other one that I could announce before the kids get here, and that is, we want to thank Counselor Gary Tannenbaum for coming to our meeting tonight, because this is his birthday. I don't know what number it is, but we really appreciate him coming.
29.
29
In the
again.
breeze.
So thank you, Gary. Okay, we
If I may, Madam Mayor,
could
It's your quorum.
also do, yes, sir.
before we get into any of the agenda items, we'll need to amend the agenda to add an item to the executive session. It's for the purpose, or it's under CRS 246424B, for the purpose of receiving legal advice to discuss the Ted Guy versus Town of Basalt lawsuit.
Okay.
So before we jump into the agenda, I would recommend the council move to amend the agenda as I just outlined, and then move forward.
Could I get a motion?
Mayor, I move to amend the agenda as proposed. To adjourn
To adjourn the agenda? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for that reminder. Okay, and another quick thing we could do is the consent agenda. There's several things on it. If there is nothing in particular that someone wants to pull off to have a discussion about, could we get a motion?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. Call to the public, we could do that. This next part of our agenda is meant for folks who want to make some kind of a statement regarding the town that is not on the agenda, something that's not on the agenda. So if there's anybody here that wants to do that, we just need to ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less and come up to the microphone, identify yourself. Anybody? Hearing none, okay. Our next item is positive comments and gratitudes, which is kind of where Gary should have been probably. Do we have anything else that's like fun, besides the snow?
Well,
That was fun.
I was gonna make a positive comment about town staff really doing a great job on the roads. This has been a very tough year, and, I've seen some sketchy conditions, and they get out and deal with them pretty quickly. And they're not coming out at 3 a.m, which is awesome, because I don't need to hear that at 3. Yeah, but they're getting it done in time, so I really appreciate Boyd, and if you could pass it on to staff.
Boyd, would you stand up and just take acknowledgement for
Boyd's
your
there.
crew? Boyd's here, come on.
Boyd's
Take a
here.
bow. Boyd is the
Thank
boss
you.
of the crew. Thank you. Anything else along those lines? Okay, then at this point,
How about we do our saying?
do our saying. Please, Jennifer.
Basalt is an inclusive, sustainable mountain community that boasts both historic charm and progressive vision. It is an engaging place to live, work, and play while offering an abundance of creative, professional, educational, and recreational outlets.
Excellent, thank you. Mayor and council reports and comments. I just wanted to say quickly that Councilor Schwer is not here tonight. I spoke with her on the phone yesterday morning, I think, when she was getting on the bus, and she told me she would not make it. Her coworker,
Aaron.
I know, I was gonna bawl.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Her coworker, Aaron Trook, was killed in an avalanche. She works at ACES. He was the education director, and I think the avalanche was on Sunday, if I recall.
Monday morning.
Monday morning. So anyway, I just want to express our sympathy for council, from the council and the staff, for the family and friends of Aaron, and to Katie as well. Any other council reports or comments?
I'd like to report from a BAC, the Basalt Affordable Community Housing, that the 2017 Multi-Jurisdictional Housing Authority report is in its final draft, and it is very comprehensive. I'm so grateful for the data that was pulled together, and what I really look forward to sharing and with council and P&Z, all of our staff and our community, is that Basalt has specific data in every single area, and that there were a fair number of respondents from Basalt, and the information is going to be so beneficial for our future planning, and looking at what the true gaps are currently and the projections into 10 years out. There's a lot of fantastic data in here, and really what it comes down to is a great part of it is not just looking at how many housing units are we are surplus or missing, but the economic impacts of housing, and that it is incredibly impactful.
Thank you. And the town was a partner in that, and as were many other jurisdictions, if I remember. It started a couple of years ago. A lot of work involved in that. So is that available for public review?
Not yet, because it's in its, it still has the word draft on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okey-doke. All right, other council? Bill, you've been gone a long time, you have to say something.
I'm just gearing up for the Northwest COG meeting on Thursday, so I was looking to see if there was anything on their agenda worth highlighting, but.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Ryan Mahoney, town manager, would you like to share your report?
Yeah, I thought actually this might be a good time to discuss a little bit. So I received an email from Councilor Riffle the other day, and she had received a letter from a group called the Western Leaders Network, and had asked that I put it in the packet. So I did that, and then I put a little blurb on my Friday report about it. So essentially, this group, the Western Leaders Network, I really didn't know much about them. I've made a few phone calls and tried to figure out a little bit more about the group. And they are sort of an environmentally focused group, it seems, and present on their board. There's a county commissioner from La Plata County as well as from Boulder County. And then I think tribes are represented on there as well. So I'm guessing the Ute tribes, maybe both of them. And so they are, represented by governments in the state of Colorado. And they are basically asking us to sign on to this letter either as a town or as individual council members. And basically what they're asking is for us to support the statewide hydrocarbon emissions reduction task force in their efforts to improve air quality. And so specifically, it was hydrocarbons that are released during oil and gas extraction. And so I in addition to finding out kind of a little bit more about this group, made some phone calls to other managers in the area, and then also to CML, just to try to get an idea, and that's Colorado Municipal League, who is a lobbyist on behalf of not only the town of Basalt, but other municipalities throughout the state. And based on that, I think that this letter, they're basically asking for rule changes and enforcement as it relates to air quality. So at face value, I think it sounds good and a worthy cause. My only hesitation on it is, we've just started the legislative session, or will be actually, I don't know that the session quite started yet. And we anticipate that there's going to be a lot of legislation forwarded on these issues. And so one thought is to perhaps just delay on it a bit to kind of see what's coming out. And then we can make a decision a little later. It's sort of to come out as the first piece of information that we receive about it, kind of without knowing a lot of what is going to be happening at the state level, is just kind of gets my hackles up a little bit, just because I'd like to see how we progress on this issue. I think it does sound worthy, but just keep in mind that the Oil and Gas Commission was the group that was behind the Amendment 74 that had that passed in the state. It would have devastated local governments for takings, and so it was kind of poking the bear, perhaps. And so I thought my suggestion to the council would be to delay signing this as the town, and then I could come back to you all with it over the next month or a few weeks, and just kind of see where things are tracking, if that makes sense to
I was
you.
just gonna say, I think maybe we all got that, I got that. I was gonna ask Bud if he's familiar with this group, and just a quick thought.
Yeah, the group I'm not familiar with, but what they're asking for, I am. It's in front of the Air Quality Control Commission that I sit on, so I'd recuse on this.
Okay. Okay, there you have that. All right. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
That was it.
Okay.
And so that, I think it seems prudent if we waited for a few weeks, and maybe even at the next council meeting, I could bring it back to you and see if I found out any more information.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I have one more. So a portion of the town is in Eagle County, and some of you may know that Jill Ryan, one of the 3 Eagle County commissioners, was brought on to our governor's board, and she is vacating her county commissioner seat, and her replacement appointment will be appointed by the Eagle County Democratic Party, and they will be meeting in Elgebel at the Eagle County Building on January 30th.
Or, yeah, 30th or 31st, I can't remember.
I think it's the 30th. And this is a fantastic opportunity. If you want to have a say in who is representing us, this is a very important opportunity to interview and meet the applicants. So please show up.
Yes. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, I think we're gonna move on, because we don't have any more fillers here, so, the first item, or item 7A, is public hearing and first reading of ordinance number 1 of 2019, an ordinance of the town granting special review site plan, Southside Reach 2 ESA floodplain, and community housing approvals for the development of a mixed-use project on Lot S, Basalt Business Center South PUD, also known as 525 Basalt Avenue. Sarah?
Thank you. Let's get the applicant team to join me up here. Let's grab a chair for Mark, and we have Nancy close, and you can pop up when you need, if needed. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mayor. So my name is Sarah Nadolny with the Town of Basalt Planning Department, and representing the project here today, we have Glenn Rappaport, who is the project architect, and Mark Jane, who is the project planner. We have Nancy Nichols in the audience, who's also working on the engineering aspects. So this project is a mixed-use development at 525 Basalt Avenue. Here's the location. It's currently a vacant parcel. It's zoned industrial. It has a PUD overlay. It is part of the Basalt Business Center South PUD. It's directly south of, here is the Rafta Overflow Park and Ride lot. And here we have the gas station at the corner there on the south side. So coming off of 82, it's the first vacant lot you come to. It's approximately 23,000 square feet in size. Some images of the lot. Here's the vacant lot taken from Basalt Avenue. You can see in back there's the Myers Company in the background there, which abuts the rear of their lot. Here's a view taken from looking south from the lot. And next view again is an image of the vacant lot that they'd be working on. So there are requesting reviews related to site plan, special review, ESA Reach 2 floodplain, and community housing. There's one round of reviews with this application. It goes to P&Z and then council. P&Z reviewed the application on December 4th and unanimously approved the project with the conditions that are drafted. So this is first reading at council, and we have drafted an ordinance that's been placed in the packet for your consideration today. To give you some background on this project, the applicant team previously met with council sometime in 2017, and this was the last of those pre-development meetings that were had. No agreement was made at this time. It was looking for direction. At the time, the applicant was proposing a 100% residential project. This did require a change in zoning and needed the HOA's consent for this rezoning. That was not granted by the HOA, and so the applicant withdrew that application. So the applicant's returning with the current proposal. It's a 3-story mixed-use building measuring 33 feet in height. This is the view from Basalt Avenue, so it's a long building that takes the bulk of it, basically is going away from the street. And here's it from the southern facade view. There are 3 distinct modules to the building. So we have 1, 2, 3. The 2 outer edges are industrial use spaces. And those bookend this 2-story residential space. It's residential's at the 2nd and 3rd stories. They are proposed at 8 one-bedroom units, so 4 in each level. Going to the site plan, you can see that there is parking at the ground level beneath the residential use along the building's southern edge, as well as at the building's rear, the rear of the site. So the application does satisfy all the dimensional requirements of the underlying zoning and uses permitted within the PUD. And staff has identified some items for council's consideration. Excuse me. First, we'll talk about consistency with the master plan, council's master plan and goals of the work mixed use typology. The project is, excuse me, pardon me, I have a frog in my throat I can't get rid of. So the project does provide the desired combination of the commercial industrial businesses with the upper floor residential uses. It has good pedestrian bicycle connections to the surrounding area. It works great as starter housing or local resident housing, and it's close to that existing transit and commercial center. Staff has drafted a condition requiring a change to the P&Z master plan. So council's master plan, again, designates the subject site as industrial with that work mixed-use typology. And as part of P&Z's 2017 review, that included a change in zoning. So P&Z approved a resolution that changed the P&Z's master plan, and that caused the subject site to have a future land use designation of high-density residential with a neighborhood multifamily typology. So staff has drafted a condition to convert the planning and zoning master plan back to its prior designation, and so that it's consistent, of course, with council's master plan. We don't have 2 master plans hanging out there. Moving on to residential, that is a permitted use in underlying zoning through special review approval. There's 3 criteria that should be met. Residential should be subordinate in size to the primary use, consistent with neighborhood character, and it should be found to be an appropriate location. And staff finds this proposal to meet all these three requirements. There are examples of mixed-use developments that have been approved on other parcels within Southside as well as the Basalt Industrial Park. And I've just pulled out 3 examples that are directly in the Southside neighborhood. It's a little difficult to see on the screen. But this is around the corner on Few Lane, this is at the corner of Few and Basalt, and this is Caller's directly across the street from this parcel. So there's 3 of quite a few examples. Okay, so how else does it meet it? This project does have lesser floor area with the residential, and it is on the edge of the industrial zone. It's adjacent to the Raptor bus stop, the pedestrian path, and downtown, so it does seem to be an appropriate location for this development. This is meeting the inclusionary housing requirement by deed restricting 4 of the 8 residential units, so 50% of those units, at a Category 2 rental rate. Affordable housing units were reviewed by the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Commission, or BAC. And it was noted by BAC that there are no tubs in the units, which is desired by the community housing guidelines. But after some discussion, BAC was ultimately okay with this. There is a larger interior storage closet. It's a little bit difficult to see, but this is 1 unit here in the green. And here's the bathroom, and here's a very large walk-in closet, same size as the bathroom. So BAC felt that that was actually a very big benefit to these units. They felt that the units were good size and there's also exterior storage, which is desirable. And regarding housing, the leases for all the units must contain the language alerting potential tenants for the presence of industrial activities on this and on the neighboring sites. And that'd be a condition that staff has recommended. And staff recommends restricting the uses on the site. And we've done this by looking at this in a 3-tiered fashion. And simple graphic here. Some uses are allowed by right. They have no parking implications or otherwise something that we would not recommend them being there. And then there's the second level of uses, which is smaller, and that is uses that must be reviewed by the town's technical review committee. And they should be reviewed in adjacent with a parking demand management plan. And these include such uses as professional offices, health club, and service uses. And then we have the 3rd tier, which is the smallest tier, and those are the prohibited uses. And those would include such things as restaurants and daycare facilities and auto repair shops. So we use this 3-tiered approach for 2 purposes. And the first is there are some commercial uses that are allowed by the underlying zoning, and commercial parking requirement is calculated at a higher rate than the industrial uses are. And staff is very sensitive to the parking needs in the Southside area, and we want to ensure that parking is accommodated for these uses on the site. So that is the first reason we have these tiers, and the second is compatibility of uses on the site. You want to ensure that the 2 uses are mixing well with what is being proposed. The full list of all the items can be found it's item 8 of the draft ordinance, and that itemizes all the ones that are would require a TRC level of approval or would be outright prohibited. And then just keep that nice picture up here. I want to address transportation. In 2015, SGM conducted a Southside traffic study on behalf of the town, and they suggested some improvements. One being additional lane in and out of Southside. That's been completed, and it does allow better traffic flow through that area. The second being the mini roundabout at Cody Lane. So with the improvements that are identified in the study, were determined to allow that area to operate at an acceptable level of service. So the applicant, conditions have been drafted that the applicant is required to pay the proportional fair share towards the mini roundabout or other traffic mitigation project as council sees fit. And also to pay the project transportation fee to offset future costs of transportation improvements to mitigate traffic growth. RAPTA has requested that a $250 fee be allocated to mobility strategies, and this condition has also been addressed in the ordinance. So to address the issue of lighting in this area, with the completion of the Highway 82 underpass and improvements to that walking path, staff is concerned about safety and adequacy of lighting in the area. So staff had Alpenglow perform an analysis of lighting, starting at the edge of the Rafta overflow lot, to the end to the gas station, around the corner, and down Few Lane, which is quite dark. So results show that this area could really benefit for some additional lighting. And so the applicant has been asked to install a street light adjacent to the entry of the lot, per the analysis, and we'll work with staff to find the most appropriate style and type of lighting. So get into Reach 2 floodplain, south side Reach 2 floodplain. So most of this area is within the floodplain, and the town's old floodplain mapping was a bit more restrictive. It would prove it difficult to have a reasonable development on many of the parcels in this area. So a couple of years ago, council directed staff to look at and amend the floodplain map accordingly, and the regulations in south side to allow reasonable development to occur here. And so the proposed application has been found to meet the requirements of the south side Reach 2 floodplain regulations. And so one final item I just want to bring forth is our town attorney has made an opinion that this application could be processed, and this is based on an opinion of the applicant's attorney, which has been provided in the packet. So our town attorney, Jeff Conklin, is here, and he's available to answer any questions regarding that as need be. So this is a public hearing, and staff does suggest hearing a presentation from the applicant's team, asking any questions that you might, or clarifications if you'd like, and then to take public comment. And if council finds you are comfortable with this application today, you may approve it upon first reading. Thank you very much.
Lynn, did you have
Something to say.
presentation? Your detailed section.
I'm Glenn Rappaport. I'm the architect for the project. I'll introduce Patrick Kilty, is the owner of the project. Mark Jane, as you know, is the planner, and Yancey Nickel is here as our engineer. So what I wanted to do is just kind of highlight some things in the packet. And Mark is here to answer questions that you may have regarding specifics in the planning package that he put together. Yancey's here primarily to address questions regarding the floodplain analysis and also traffic. And Patrick Kilty can jump in anytime he wants. But I'll just try to be pretty brief, even though there's a lot of things. But the staff did a very nice, thorough job with the packet, of course. So it's a typical transit-oriented project. It's luckily for us, it's 1 inch from the transit lot. And as you guys know, the first mile and the half mile and the last mile are the biggest things with transit-oriented projects. If they're more than a mile away, people tend to drive more than they tend to use the public transit. So that's a good thing. The other thing I just want to highlight is that this project doesn't ask for any variances, and it's not asking for any zoning changes. So there was a little bit of a misconception, I think, with some of the property owners that the changes, some of the conditions might affect other parcels, but that's not the case. It's a one-shot deal. These conditions affect Patrick, but not every other parcel will be reviewed on its own merits. We don't have any issues with any of the conditions. The other thing that I would highlight is that I know that there are other projects in the pipeline, other residential projects. Some of them have fairly substantial subsidies from various entities. I think it's really important to look at projects that aren't trying to do their work and provide attainable housing without any subsidies. And so I think that this is a really good example of a project that's trying to do that. The apartment sizes are just under 800 square feet. They're about 790 square feet, which is a pretty good size one-bedroom apartment, as you guys know. We had a very good review with Bach. I think that maybe there was a letter in your packet from one of the Bach members. There was a 100% unanimous approval at the P&Z level for the project. We believe that the project meets the goals of the master plan, and luckily for Patrick, the project, as I said, is in the right location, and also now the underpass is complete, so it really does connect the south side with the town in a very nice, usable pedestrian way. We, as you guys know, have agreed to the 10-foot wide sidewalk across Basalt Avenue that was required by Parks, Open Space and Trails. So that's something we've tried very hard to work with the Property Owners Association, keeping them informed about hearings and changes in the project before we were required to do that. Hopefully, what you won't see here are the Blodgetts from Myers Metals. We've worked with them so that they don't have any issues with us anymore. They were concerned in the beginning, but we've addressed their concerns, I think, pretty nicely. And as is mentioned in the packet, there's a provision in the lease that makes everybody aware that this is an industrial zone, and there are certain considerations that you would have to be aware of in order to sign a lease to rent an apartment in this area. We tried to do a very nice job with the site plan, giving a pedestrian face to the street with a bench and some plantings, and think it'll be used. And also, it was important for Patrick and us to put windows with people working on the street to energize the street frontage of the project, and that was a big deal. Just very quickly, so the industrial units, there's 2 of them at bookends to the project. They're each about 3,200 square feet, so a total of 6,400 square feet of light industrial or industrial. The parking requirements are 1 to 500, so there's 13 spaces for the industrial. As you guys know, the residential will require 1.5 spaces per 1-bedroom unit. There's about 6,300 square feet of residential. So we have 4 guests, 2 handicapped, and the others are compliant. So it's obviously a tight parcel. It's a little less than half an acre, as Sarah mentioned. So things are tight. I mean, if we make more commercial or more industrial, we would have to provide more parking. So everything's kind of pushing itself into a place that we think is good, but it is tight, and it's part of the reason that these 2 parcels that are both the same size have never been developed in 25 years. Other things were, of course, the floodplain considerations. But I did want to also underline that Patrick has volunteered to deed restrict, 50%, and you guys know that the requirement is 25%. He has 6 units in the Basalt Trade Center that were completed in the early 2000s, about 2001. And 2 of those units, I think it's 2 that are deed restricted. It was one of the first employee housing projects. He's been a good steward of affordable housing already, so he knows the routine, and it's worked out fine for him. So he's volunteering to do this, knowing how it works, and I think that's really a nice thing. There was a condition, and then I'll stop, but there was a condition at the P&Z level that we would provide 2 more parking spaces in an area that we thought might be constricted for floodplain concerns. We worked with Yancey and his group at Sopris, and we've been able to add those 2 spaces, which is basically what I laid out for you earlier. So with that, I think we should just take questions from you guys. Thank you.
So I would solicit questions from council, just clarifying questions, but I would love to hear from the public always before we get into any deep discussion. So if anybody has a clarifying question that you would like to run by Glenn or his crew, please do. Otherwise, I'll open. Yes.
Are any of the rental units ADA handicap accessible?
I think the requirement is 1.
And I didn't see that on the floor plan.
Yeah.
So the floor plans are double stacked, and so I kind of just, when I put mine up there, I did grab one of the floor plans. I don't know that either of them did represent it,
In the
but
packet,
we had discussed that with Bach, and that one would absolutely have to be. So with that one unit that would be accessible would be required to have a bathtub. So the trade-off would be a smaller closet space for that, and it would require a lift and such, and that is actually a part of staff's memo does discuss that as well. So that'd be something that would have to be compliant, ADA compliant.
And is that one of the category 2 units, or is it a free market?
No, that's something we have discussed yet.
I think we would take direction from the staff on that. So, but there is an elevator, and so all of the units are accessible, but the requirement is for one to be fully ADA compliant.
And has it been defined if it's on the second or the third floor?
No, but I mean, we would, if there was a direction that worked, we would take that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council before we go to the public hearing? Okay, this is public hearing. We'll open it at 6:40. So anybody who has comments regarding this application, if you could please come up to the microphone, just say who you are and try to limit your comments to about 3 minutes if you can.
Hi, my name is John Fitzpatrick. I have 281 Cody Lane, Basalt. And I'm opposed to any kind of residential building in an industrial zone. I think it has for trouble. They're inherently loud, can be odorous. I mean, there's a lot of construction equipment. There's always a lot of trucking that's going on, backup alarms. Businesses can be run at all hours of the night. I mean, tow trucks have to come in and bring vehicles. I just think it's inappropriate in an industrial zone to be adding a considerable amount of residential. I would, do a flip of this. Let's say I wanted to develop a lot in Elk Run and build a commercial industrial building. That would be, really inappropriate. And I feel the flip side of this, if this is inappropriate in an industrial zone, that we need to leave that as it is and no residential. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for coming in. Others? Hello.
Excuse me. Stefan Isbarian, owner of Isbarian Mud Company on Cody Lane, part of the BBC East. We have several lots there, as does Fitzpatrick's and the towing company. What's her name? The towing.
Sean's.
No, the owner of that property.
Oh, the owner is Denise
Sparkman and several others. So there are a lot of lots there that have not been developed as yet. And we're very concerned about the depletion of industrial lots and businesses within this subdivision. We're blessed here in Basalt with having this kind of an industrial park. We have plenty of residential being built, already built, and on the books to be built. We have up on the south side, we've got Studs Mill, and we have the Habitat, and we've got more of the mini storages, and then other projects. South side is not fully developed as yet. There's a river park discussion, there's this and that. Plenty of other areas that could house the residential. Our limited amount of industrial and commercial is very, very valuable to Basalt. We don't want to dilute it. This building, good looking as it is really a mixed use, which was never allowed in the beginning. I don't know where the zoning approval came from. We know in 2017, the staff and the application that went in was quickly approved for 16 units. No consideration for industrial or whatever. That was subsequently when the BBCA, which is the association that combines BBC East, West, and South, found out about it and realized that it can't be done. It was withdrawn, and Mr. Kilty then redesigned it to put in mixed-use 8 units, which, we all know the stress of the need for housing, but there's places to put it, and there are not places to put it. Part of the things that happen when you mix use like this is you have to compensate so you don't interrupt the residential, which is, you know, you don't want to hear things. So there's restrictions being applied that never did apply to any of those lots in the BBC that can't be put there. Page 13 or whatever it is shows all kinds of things that are not allowed any longer. And is this a precedent we're setting? Because if somebody wants to develop their, if we find that residential is far more profitable. Now, we had a meeting last Tuesday at Myers, and Mr. Kilty showed up, and we were all discussing things. And one of the questions we asked is how much rent is going to be for these 8 units. And, you know, initially he said, well, you know, we haven't done that. You know, we did. Yes, you did, because you have to do a prospectus when you do a project. You have to know how much you're going to be bringing in as income. And he mentioned $1,700. Now, we have $1,700 for a 1-bedroom unit. And then there's going to be deed restricted. Now, who's going to administer that? I mean, in deed restricted for how much? How much is that? It's not really addressing employees, and it's not addressing the needs. For 8 units, which could possibly be 8 because for 16 people, if you have 2 people per apartment, it's a big burden on the Basalt Business Center. They pointed out similar projects like Cather's. Well, those apartments above were never housing for rental. They were employee units, which after years never got policed, and they're now rentals. Same with, which could happen here. We always thought that if we develop our lots and we make an industrial or and commercial mix to it, we would put 2 or 1 or 3 employee units above, and that was, everybody was in favor of that, and that's what we're in favor of. There's so much development in Willits, across the highway at the tree farm coming up. The ski corps is wanting to put in all their employee housing. They have the infrastructure there. Leave it go over there. We want to keep our industrial park industrial.
Thank you, Stefan. Oh, good timing. Another speaker?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Greta McKenney, but I'm here on behalf of Marty Schlumberger, who could not be here, and he is the owner of Lot T, which is immediately adjacent to Lot S. And he's asked me to read a letter that is included in your packet tonight, but again, because he could not be here. It was originally addressed to Susan Phillips, Planning Director, and to the Basalt Town Council regarding the 525 Basalt Avenue proposed development application, Lot S, in the Basalt Business Center South. It says, Dear Ms. Phillips and Basalt Town Council members, the proposed development at 525 Basalt Avenue is incompatible and inconsistent usage of Lot S of the Basalt Business Center South, and as the adjacent property owner, I'm opposed to this project. The BBCS covenants, conditions, and restrictions specifically state that lots in the BBCS are intended to be developed primarily for commercial and industrial uses. And this is Article 5.1, Land Use, page 7 of the Basalt Business Center South Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. The 525 project offers 51% industrial usage and 49% residential usage, which creates a majority, but does not meet the primary development requirements. The CC&Rs require specifically that the landscape plan be approved by the ACC prior to any improvements being constructed on any lot. The landscape plan for the 525 project has not been submitted for approval as of this date. I feel that traffic flow will also be adversely impacted as well. The current configuration of the intersection at Highway 82 and Basalt Avenue is inadequate, and there are backups and delays daily. The distance from the entry of the 525 project to the stoplight at Highway 82 is not adequate to allow for smooth and safe entry-exit of the property. Please refer to the current problem accessing Cody Lane from Basalt Avenue to support this. There are currently residential projects surrounding the Basalt Business Center that will provide significantly more opportunity for affordable housing than the 525 project can offer, and it would be to no advantage to reduce the industrial lots available in the Basalt Business Center. I am requesting that the Town Council participate in maintaining the intended use of the parcels in the Basalt Business Center South as industrial, and this development application not be approved. Sincerely, Martin Schlumberger, owner, Lot T, BBC South. I have a couple of other comments also that Mr. Schlumberger asked that I pass on. One, that while this project meets the town's requirements, it falls short in other areas, and thus it has not been approved by the BBC South HOA. By nature of the many restrictions being placed on the development plan of Lot S, this shows that the residential development is not consistent or compatible for an industrial zoned parcel. And then finally, per zoning district schedule of uses, the accessory dwelling units are an approved usage in an industrial zone as an accessory to primary use. By definition, town municipal code, an ADU shall mean deed restricted community housing. And while 4 of these units have been offered as deed restricted, per the zoning, they are all supposed to be deed restricted. So I would ask that you look at what an accessory dwelling unit usage in an industrial zone really means, and if these 8 proposed units actually do meet the zoning for accessory dwelling units. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greta.
Hi, I'm Jillian Copps, and I'm going to be very brief. I just wanted to mention that I also feel very strongly about keeping this industrial. I'm opposed to residential. I think that it's a very unique situation that we have in the BBC, and we generate a lot of sales tax, and I would like to keep it industrial and commercial use, and I just don't think it's compatible at all with residential. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Anyone else?
I'm reading this is from Jim Jenkins. I'm Heather Isberian, but this is Jim Jenkins, who has property over on South Side as well, asked me to just quickly read this through. It was something he put together quickly tonight. To whom it may concern, my name is Jim Jenkins. I am opposed to the new ordinance being proposed for the 525 project. The project is being sold to the town as affordable housing. It is not. The rents being contemplated at starting at $30 per foot for 1 bedroom. That means a person must earn $60,000 per year to qualify for the unit. The project also requires a change to the PUD, which has not been approved by the majority of the property owners. In addition, the new ordinance prohibits existing uses, which will affect the resale value for existing lots and businesses. There also is not enough parking for 8 units plus the proposed commercial spaces. The parking lot is small and unusable. The limitations being contemplated for the leases are unrealistic and not enforceable. No children are allowed. How will that stop? Who will stop it? This project will erode the supply of industrial property in Basalt in favor of so-called affordable housing. There is plenty of affordable housing now and being contemplated. The change of use being proposed is a taking by the government and should be stopped. Please do not approve this project. Sincerely, Jim Jenkins. And I have a question. The prohibited uses on this particular proposal, if it is said that this will not apply to any more going forward, would the town be willing to put that in writing?
We're just taking comment right now. That will
It's just a
probably be
question
addressed.
from me.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll close public hearing. And let's go to council to see if there's any comments, questions from either the applicant or staff.
Yeah, how long has this parcel been empty? Does staff?
25, since 1993.
I was just kind of interested in looking at the kinds of activities that are not permitted. Who do you envision would be kind of your ideal tenant in this, in the industrial elements of the property?
Contractor. I mean, I think the original thought was, I mean, Patrick's other building has an electrician and a plumber, somebody in the trades, basically. And initially, we were a little concerned with the kind of micromanaging some of the uses, like a woodworker could have 20 woodworkers, which wouldn't be so good, or it could be a single person. And so, but in talking with the staff, they were going to review those things on a case-by-case basis. And so we were going to be required to produce a parking plan or something, or describe the business that was going to go in. So I think in the end, Patrick was okay with that.
I have a question. Can you clarify for me? I understand that a zoning went through planning commission and was approved, never went to the council, never got approved by council. What is the actual, just tell me, the actual status of the zoning right now? What is it now?
Well, is that okay? Sorry. Do you want to?
Yeah, so the zoning, I mean, there's basically.
Actually, that was the master plan that went, right, okay.
Exactly, so we're talking like the future land use map.
Yes, exactly.
So obviously the parcel was never rezoned, of course, it's industrial, the PUD overlay, and when it went through P&Z, it did go through with that change to the master plan. So the work mixed use typology, I have to get my correct typologies here. So it should be work mixed use typology, and that was changed to neighborhood multifamily typology with a high density residential as the future land use designation. So right now, there's two kind of future land use maps out there. There's the council map, and P&Z's made I would say a premature change to that. And so as part of this condition, staff would be bringing back to P&Z the amendment to amend that future land use map and typology back to be consistent with council's, the way council says today.
Okay, well, I have a whole bunch, so I'll just go. I totally can relate to the things that the folks who own commercial property are concerned about. And normally I would say in other places where I do business over there, which is everywhere I do business, I think it would be less likely that this mixed use would work very well. But I am actually a land use major, although I never really throw that up too much. But I had to go back today and do a little digging up of research, because you don't have to be a land use major to say this parcel is right next to the bus stop, and there's some things that could happen there that make it a higher value for the community, actually. And so one of the things I do support is that some of this should be residential, but where I cross paths with the staff recommendation is some of the uses that are prohibited, and very specifically, if I've talked to one person in the south side, I've talked to 20 who are dissatisfied with the fact that there is not a single restaurant over there. And everything that I read online today reaffirmed for me that when you have thousands of people going through on a bus and thousands of people, or at least hundreds of people living there, easy access from the other side, you don't necessarily have to ramp up parking to allow for food to be served. And I go over to the south side and I always say to myself, where do these people eat? Where do they eat? So I would like us to question that as well, because if you're gonna have a truly workable mixed use, like kind of a mini mixed use, like what this is geared towards, you need to have some people-oriented stuff. I mean, the whole idea of mixed use is to have a place for people to sit and wait for the bus, and some retail for people who are getting on and off the bus to make that easy. So, I mean, I know this would be a starting over, but I would be hard pressed to support something that didn't have some community assets in it that would actually help these other business owners that are out there. I mean, it would be, like I say, I've been over there a million times for tires, rugs, you name it, and it's just doesn't feel like anywhere, partly because of what is missing at that location. And many applicants come in here and claim that they have transit-oriented development, and most of them don't, honestly. They're, you know, I won't name names, but many of them don't. This is, and I think we should push really hard to make this right and make it so that it is something good for the existing commercial folks who are out there, commercial industrial, and also make it viable as transit-oriented commercial mixed use. So that's my thought on this, is that we are gonna really miss the boat if this goes through without a restaurant and or some small retail for people who are getting on off the bus and who live on the south side and don't have access without crossing the highway to anything. So that's my thing. Anybody? Yeah.
I have a couple comments along the same line. I agree with Jackie. I didn't understand why restaurants would be prohibited, and I guess I think of the experience up at ABC where Mawa's Kitchen is kind of really cool. That's where she does her industrial back office stuff to do all the catering, but then she also has a little tiny franchise where people in ABC can go and get a bite to eat. So I'm not foreshadowing to, not prescribing that you have a restaurant, but I don't think it makes sense to prohibit having a restaurant there if it makes sense and if it serves a community need. I guess I was only going to comment on my own experience with mixed use. We have a commercial facility down in the Willits Bend property that frankly functions really well. That's mixed use, light industrial, commercial, office, and residential. And about half of it's residential and about half of it is some combination of light industrial, and then I guess we're probably one of the only commercials. There aren't too many offices, to the best of my knowledge, but frankly, when the work folks show up, the residentials are leaving, and when the residentials come back home, the work folks are gone. And it has worked out really, really well, frankly, for parking and for other functions. So I tend to see this as complementary use, and in Southside, I think it could be advantageous. The light industrial that we see is a roofer who does a lot of sheet metal work. He makes noise during the day, but that is during the day, and he's been very respectful. So I don't think we can conclude that there will necessarily be antagonism, and my own experience would argue quite the contrary. And so I tend to see this as advantageous, and also in the spirit of kind of checking the boxes that we're interested in. I am very concerned that we do attract business to Basalt, and so the notion of having some commercial or industrial is very, very attractive. But we've also talked about affordable housing, and although this may not be affordable, attainable will bring more housing into the stock in close proximity to downtown, where we want to drive vitality and vigor. So it kind of checks a lot of the boxes for me that we've talked about in our strategy. And I would have to close by commenting that I can't imagine two people more different than Kathy Click and Mark Blodgett, and for both of them to come out in support of this project is quite extraordinary.
I have a question for Sarah regarding what is the HUD AMI for category 2?
I knew that was gonna come up and.
It's 100%.
Okay, 100% AMI for basalt in 2017 is $98,000 combined household income. Okay. Looking at what is lacking in the, and so category 2 is 100%, just to clarify again. Okay, so what is really missing in basalt town proper? Less than 60% AMI. So, what is 60%? Well, that's 60,000. Easy math. 100% AMI is 100,000. So let's do 60% AMI is 60,000. We are lacking 575 units. In the 61 to 80% AMI, we're lacking 95 units. In the 80 to 100% AMI, the numbers drastically decrease. We are in 22 units, and 100 to 120 AMI is where it is the lowest. And these numbers do not take into account the approved, what we have approved in the last 2 years that are unbuilt. So what I'm considering here is, I'd like to ask the applicant, why are you choosing 100 or category 2?
Well, I mean, I can try to respond. Basically, what we did was we thought about what kind of unit is going to be attractive to a single person or a couple without children. And so those were 1-bedroom units, which is a little odd. Normally, you would want to do 2-bedroom units, but we knew that we weren't going to be able to accommodate families in this project. The units are slightly larger than what a typical 1-bedroom affordable unit would be. I don't remember what the numbers are. Maybe Sarah would know, but because we kind of wanted to make them pretty nice. And so then it was, in the discussions with staff, it was kind of agreed that this would be a category 2 unit. And so, and like I said before, I mean, I think that, you know, it's obvious that everything is kind of in a tight package in the project. And so category 2 units, extending that to 50% instead of 25%, starts to make the numbers work. And I know that's not something the council is excited about, that the numbers are working, but it's a big consideration and going forward. And like I said before, we don't have any subsidies going on. I know Real America was great at getting their subsidies together and all that. But I do think it's important for the town's vision to have some projects that are, this is only 8 units, it's not 58 units. I think that dividing up the attainability and all that in a number of locations is a benefit. And so that's kind of how we got where we are.
Okay. So fellow counselors, I ask you, how do the numbers work for us? And what is it that we're aiming for? I just pointed out a very stark contrast, that we're lacking 22 units in this category 2 realm, and we are lacking 575 units in the 60% and lower. Just keep that in mind. And then I'd like to ask staff of who is responsible. James, are you still responsible for doing the deed restriction and checking in on that? Thanks.
Yeah, basically the applicant finds proposed potential tenants, and then the planning staff reviews them for income qualifications, as well as employment qualifications to meet our guidelines.
And how much of your time currently is this taking up of your workload with all of the deed restrictions that we have? Do you have an estimate of what percentage of a full-time employee?
Well, it depends. It's different based on the different times of year. We have, kind of cycles. So the bigger projects like Real America and Willits 7, they basically get renewals like once a year. So there's a 2 or 3 month period where it's more significant. So, probably, I don't know, maybe 20% of time throughout the year.
Anyway.
Okay, well, just as
Some percentage.
just as a guesstimate, I'm not gonna hold that to you. What I'm getting at is, deed restriction is really important, and it is a great way for us to achieve this goal of having attainable housing. And at the same time, what is the cost to our staff? And how do we recoup that salary? And I'd like to flip the idea into the future. This is something that I would like to work on as my pet project of looking at a fee for deed restriction. Because what we're looking at and what we have approved, if you remember what our last couple of development approvals have been, a majority of them have been approvals for residential in industrial areas that are 1-bedroom units that no kids can live at. This is not meeting what our needs are. And we are beginning to gentrify our industrial zones by turning them into a greater ratio of residential. And so what I feel and think with this project is to allow some residential, but not a 52% split of residential to industrial. I am game for looking at vital ways. I am receptive to the idea of food service. I am very concerned about the parking, but going forward, I'd like to bring it back to the applicant to consider more industrial and less residential. And with that, I see it as becoming a major precedent that we are approving all of these residential and industrial areas. And it's a precedent. I really appreciate a possible future SKICO proposal to develop housing in Willits. SKICO owns a couple large lots in the Basalt Business Center, or the South Side area, and that is a concern of setting this precedent for more and more residential in that area, which is then going to squeeze out our industrial, which is then going to reduce our tax income, which is a major point of Basalt's financial viability. With that, I really appreciate that a unit is ADA. I recommend it being on the second floor, just as input of being friends with an ADA person who does live in an elevator building in Basalt, and she commonly gets stranded, and it takes great resources for our fire department to put her in a gurney and lower her down. She has been left in her apartment for periods of time. That's an unfortunate thing, so
You
it's.
mean first floor instead of second floor?
There are no residential units on the first floor because the first floor is parking. So we're putting an ADA person on the second floor.
Right.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Can I just throw in that I agree with you on the types of deed restricted housing. I haven't read the report, clearly, you're reading right out of the report, I agree with that. The one thing that I think this parcel is a little bit different than, say, where Bill is, your other project that was mixed use, or one in the industrial center across the street from me, is it's nowhere near a bus. It's nowhere near a bus, and that is the one thing about this one that, even though it's a small TOD, it's for real, and I hate to take that away, but it does need to be, as far as I'm concerned, oriented towards bus riders who may not be in an income that would be able to be there.
But when you look at who the bus drivers are, what is great in Basalt is we have a low ratio of commuters. If you look at the numbers from Carbondale, Glenwood Springs, we all do have at least one household member that does commute to Aspen. But in Basalt, the numbers do decrease, and there are a lot of people that live and work in Basalt. It is a greater ratio. So with that in mind, when you look at the lower AMI, those are going to be the more incentivized people to ride bus. If you can afford $1,700 a month in rent, then you are going to be having a higher income. Your household is going to be making $100,000 a year, and you're more likely to get in your vehicle and drive it because you own a nicer vehicle and you appreciate your privacy. Those things that Raft has been struggling against. On the concept, one other one of looking at the vitality of what draws in money to downtown Basalt. Overspending is overspending on housing costs. On average is $400 per month per household. That turns out to millions, like it's $350 million in the Roaring Fork Valley that is lost income in tax revenues. And so if we can aim for lower or different categories, then that is going to actually what is going to drive our economy and bring that money back into our downtown.
Gary, did you?
Yeah, I mean, reading through this application, I had similar concerns about the prohibited uses. And I was really concerned about those because in light industrial, commercial, I was hoping that we'd have more allowed commercial uses in this zone. This is a struggle because this is as good transit-oriented development as you can get. I mean, really, truly, being right next to the bus is the perfect spot to put some residential on this. This is one of those things where we're not subsidizing this affordable housing, so the reality is they could go back to what the town requires, and I would rather have more deed restricted than less lower deed restriction. Because that's my concern is if, right now they're proposing 50%, they only have to do 25%. So, I'm concerned about that because we're not subsidizing it. Now, I'm not saying there's a way to figure out to do it, but that's a way to make it more affordable if there's a way to figure out the numbers. Really, truly, we're about to do a whole master plan revision. And, in a revision of a master plan, I would like to have a really good view of where we put light industrial and where we put transit-oriented development and residential. I do understand the neighbors have a big issue with, having some residential with the light industrial. The reality is here, Myers is there. Myers is gonna be the loudest of the loud there. And, any of the residential that's in Cathars and all that stuff knows that. They're gonna know this here. So I can't imagine, what are they gonna do? Coming into town and we're gonna stop the light industrial piece? No, we're not gonna do that. So anyway, I'm in support of this mixed use. I don't know about the numbers of percentage between commercial and non-commercial, but I really have an issue with this prohibitive use thing. I didn't delve into that enough to really understand why we're doing that and why can't it change. But I do know that during the next master plan revision for the entire town, the parcels closer are gonna be looked at as transit-oriented development. And that's just the reality of what we need to do as a town, is we need to put people near the bus. I use the bus, and, I use the bus a ton, and, I'm not that close to the bus as this would be, but I'd walk there, and I even at a category 2 unit, these people who, if they're in Aspen, are gonna use the bus, because it's such a cool thing to walk outside and grab that. So, anyway, I'd like to work on this a little bit more and try to figure out the prohibited use thing. We can have a discussion about the categories of units and how many. I just do have, under our current town code, we require 25%. So they're proposing 50 deed restricted. So that's something we can have a conversation on. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, thank you, the people who oppose this. You've been heard, and I appreciate your coming in. And I could be wrong on this, but it's not my sense that there's a screaming demand for commercial and industrial over there. That parcel's been sitting there for a while. I know that SKICO applied to do housing on those other parcels, and it wasn't accepted by the association. So there's demand for housing, there's not demand for commercial industrial, so I disagree that we're foregoing revenue. The other industrial use that went in was the mini storage. But otherwise, I'm not aware of too much demand there. It's also, I don't think it's accurate to say that there is tons of housing around. There isn't. There's a just ridiculous demand for housing, not just affordable, but any kind. This year, in town in Aspen, there are businesses that just can't run kitchens because they don't have enough employees. So, you know what? This, to me, looks like a compromise. There's some industrial and commercial there. It's still going to be there. There's some housing. If this were all housing, I think I'd be more sympathetic to the concerns. But many of you on council have said this is appropriate for transit-oriented housing. It really is. And you're right, Gary, it's going to be, when we redo the master plan, we're going to make those decisions as well. So I'd say we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good on the number of affordable units. We need 22 of these types of units. And to Gary's point, we're getting a few of them. I'm also, I'm fine with this idea that maybe there should be more commercial uses like a kitchen. I'm open to that conversation with the applicant. But I chafe a little bit at the idea of kind of micro-engineering an applicant's project with too much detail. We should reject it if that's the case. We don't want to send you back and say, make these little tweaks. So I support it as is. I'm open to this conversation on uses of the commercial.
I think, listening to Gary, we can't really micro-engineer the application, but I think we can work with our staff to take away restricted uses that work really well with TOD. I mean, then it's more your option, but I think that you would be reaching out also to the folks who may be in here testifying against your project by offering something that is not only for the community and the transit riders, but for the folks who have businesses out there where some of those businesses you have to wait for things to happen. So that's the direction I would say we should go on this. And I just can't be too against the concept of TOD by transit stop. Excuse me.
And the high school. I mean, that's an incredible
And the high
captive
school, I mean, the high
audience.
school is the other one. Those are the other people who have to walk 40 miles to get a hamburger. So anyway, I think that our comments are finished. Is anybody up for any kind of motion?
Yeah, Mayor, I move the town council approve ordinance number 1, series of 2019 on first reading and continue and set the public hearing and second reading for February 12th, 2019.
Further discussion on that?
So could we have, I mean, my biggest concern is, for second reading, is to make sure that we have a discussion on the prohibited uses and potentially some of the housing mix piece while we're going between the two readings.
And please clarify in the packet what category 2 rent is.
Yeah.
Put a number to it, please.
Well, it's just, it's getting to Jen's point on the category 2 rents and where that is, and, you know, any discussion that we can have about, you know, if we're gonna make it category 1, does that bring the amount of affordable units down, or not? Just to be able to kind of have that discussion between category 1 and category 2, before second reading. I mean, so we can have that discussion at second reading, because I'm gonna support this on first reading with knowing that we'll have that just quick discussion on before we adopt the second reading.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okey doke. So we have some stuff to do on both sides. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. We appreciate it. Our next item is public hearing and first reading on ordinance 4, an ordinance of the town granting special review approval for a medical marijuana center at 175 Midland Avenue, Unit 10. James?
Yeah, I don't think our applicants are here yet, but,
I'll go look. Can we do the staff
I
part
thought
of
we
it?
continued this. Is this different than what we continued?
Different, yeah.
Okay.
Because one's
since the applicants aren't
on the
here,
consent.
would council
What?
entertain,
The consent one was continued.
discussion of, flipping
Oh.
these two items
Sure.
since we're early?
You're talking about,
Okay.
because on the consent agenda.
Brian, we're gonna
something's
flip,
continued.
B and C
B and C.
because they're not here. Okay, so really, take it back what I said. What we're really gonna discuss is,
I would just have someone make a motion to amend the agenda to flip-flop those two.
okay,
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to go to resolution number 2.
okay. I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we're gonna go to item 7C, resolution 2, a resolution of the town approving a portion of the funds identified for signage in the 2019 town budget to design entry signs for the east and west entrances to East Basalt, and asking the Basalt Chamber Sign Committee to issue a request for proposal. James again.
Thank you.
James anyway.
This is consideration of a resolution that would direct the Basalt Chamber Sign Committee to issue a request for proposals for the design of entrance signs for the intersections of Two Rivers Road and Highway 82 at the east and west end entrances to downtown. As background, the Chamber Sign Committee has been working on entry signage at the various town entrances over quite a few years. And they've conducted design, charrette, and RFQ in 2013 for the Basalt Avenue roundabout sign, which everybody knows, but here's a picture of it. And then in years following 2013, they did wayfinding signs across Basalt Avenue and Midland Avenue to find the way into town for motorists. And then this last year, they worked with the BBC group on the south side sign and got that installed. So the committee now thinks the appropriate work that they would like to do is on signage for entry for the east and west entrances into Basalt. And they would like to put out a request for proposals to get potential designers for designing those two signs. They're suggesting that it would be about $8,000 out of the $50,000 budget that we have in 2019 for signage. And then after they put out the RFP, they would come back to council with the recommendation on the designer, and then council could consider potential contract for that design. Lynn Mace, who is the chair of the sign committee, was going to be here this evening, but I got an email from her right before the meeting indicating that she had a friend that was in the hospital, so she couldn't make it this evening. So staff would recommend council discussion, and if you're comfortable, you could approve the resolution directing the sign committee to do an RFP for design.
Any questions? Yeah, Gary?
I just got one. I mean, it seems like we're in a pretty good design. Like, we got, this one's great, the other one's great. I mean, how much more, I mean, are we gonna try to differentiate from this?
No, it'd have to be along, the way the sign committee is envisioning it is designers would have to design a sign, and part of the RFP would be to be in a similar theme to what's already kind of out there with the current entry signs. However, we, because of the town's procurement policy, would have to put it out to bid, and we can't use, just identify a specific designer to do it.
Well, you can. Ryan has the power to do that, but I just look at spending a lot of money on a design when it's gonna be pretty, I would hope our signs are all gonna be relatively, similar. So I mean, I'm just putting it out there, trying to make it all easier, is to try to design something pretty similar to what we got, to do it a much cheaper, and just make that happen, under a certain amount, that we can do this. Because I look at it going, the designer most likely you're gonna pick is probably the same designer, because this is what you want. So anyway, I could be completely off.
Actually, I had the same conversation with Ryan, because I'm really concerned about spending a whole bunch of money and then just having, a mishmash of stuff everywhere where you can't tell if you're in the same town or not. I don't like that idea, and so I think.
I really like that sign.
I really like that sign too.
I have a question. Did Nick Aceto, did Aceto design this sign and the south side sign?
He did, yes,
Along with all the other little wayfinding?
along with the wayfinding.
And what is the budget for the two signs for each of the entrances?
Well, for the design, the sign committee was thinking 8,000, and that simply comes off of what it cost to do the design for the south side sign, which was 4,000.
Okay. And then how much was this sign just to build?
The south side sign was approximately 40,000 to build and install.
And then what about the roundabout sign?
The roundabout sign was 2013, and it was in the realm of, I think, 38,000 total.
Okay.
So this year we'd get a design for both and one sign.
Right.
And then theoretically,
But to
So
Gary's
just-
point, why are we designing it again?
Right, why don't we just rebuild? That's what I'm getting at, is why don't we just plunk this sign, make 2 more copies of it, and put it on either of the entrances, and that way they're all the same?
Well, we don't currently have a design for the east and west signs. I mean, they could be similar, but they're probably going to be slightly different, but in the same theme, kind of as the south side sign is slightly different, but in the same theme.
I think what the question is why do we have to have a new design? Why can't we use the same design and just pay for manufacturing?
Well, I think that originally the idea was for the, I'm sorry, decades.
Yeah, that's okay.
But the Basalt Avenue sign was supposed to be the big entry, the big sign for Basalt, and the other signs are kind of accent signs. The thought of, so it's not really supposed to be replicating the same sign, they have kind of different purposes. And there is some thought that the east entry sign at Two Rivers Road could potentially have information on it, like for community events, et cetera. So it might be a little bit different style.
All right.
Just refresh my memory, under our procurement policy that we just passed, what's the limit for basically non-competitive, so single source, sole source?
was it 5,000?
5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't we do this? Put it out there for 5 and
See what we get.
see what we get.
I
We could.
am also, game designers on the one side, I am receptive to putting it out there to the design community, because it is easy to replicate another design and use the same font, but it be a local. So this designer does not reside in the Roaring Fork Valley. They are not even within the state.
True.
I'm much more game for giving business to local to maintain our industrial areas and our design professionals.
Okay,
I'm
so.
okay.
Well, you're talking about Nick? because he was local when we.
Right.
When we do this, I'm fully in favor of reusing existing design. It doesn't have to be fancy, but could we reconsider, maybe as part of the RFP, say, can you make a sign cheaper? I can't have to spend that much money on a sign. It's like,
crazy.
I'm not a sign builder by trade, but I could build a sign that was cheaper than
One-
30 grand.
I've thought about that, and, you know, we did put the sign out for bid, and we got prices back, and so I think that $40,000, you know, the metal work it's pretty customized, and so I think that increases the price, and it's also one-off, so I think that also, you know, adds to that. But then, you know, I think from a government standpoint, it's important that, not that we necessarily spend a lot of money, but sort of the adage of you get what you pay for. We do want our signs to stand the test of time and the weather and elements and, you know, what have you. So, I think we want quality, you know, at the end of the day. Does it have to be $40,000? Well, if we could get it for less, that would be awesome. But particularly if we're gonna stay local, I think, you know, you pay a premium in the valley versus trying to farm it out to, you know, a company in Iowa that might, you know, ship it in or something like that. So, I mean, I think we just weigh all of that.
Yeah, that's fine. I would just say, you know, if we can save 40 grand and put it into beautifying this building, I know it's not fungible in that way, but that matters too, you
Yeah,
know?
It does.
It's a lot of money for a sign.
It is. Can we just at some point say, we've expressed our concerns, staff hears that, right? Got one more?
What is the east and west interest? Is east the up
East.
valley?
Yeah.
East is Up Valley, west is Down Valley, Two Rivers Road, Highway 82.
Are we having are we gonna have a council meeting with the sign committee?
Oh, you
Oh,
can.
I hope not.
Yeah.
But
It's not-
honestly,
it's
this
not
is-
a committee of the
Right.
town.
It's the chamber.
It's the chamber.
But that's what I'm getting at, is we need to be able, we have very specific input to get in that direction, and
Yeah.
as long as that gets clearly passed on.
James does support, he sits on that
Sure.
committee in a support role, so I have no doubt that that'll get
So
translated.
there will be a time, an interim time, when we can take a peek at price and design.
Sure, and the concept is if council passed the resolution that they would put the RFP out, the RFP would have the feedback that council has tonight, given the sign committee, and then once we got the proposals back, the sign committee would bring those back to the council and say, here's our best proposal. Council, do you want to enter into a contract?
Are we comfy? Okay.
One addition, do you think we could ask Nick if he could affordably modify his existing design?
Right.
As one of the bids?
We could.
Honestly, for a $4,000 solicitation, you're gonna consume more than that in staff time trying to pull the proposal together. In the interest of the de minimis nature of this, cut to the chase, ask Nick if he can do it for $5,000. If he says yes, say, Nick, we need 2 signs. Get them to us under these specifications. Gotta be consistent artistically, and they gotta be less expensive than what you produced in the
Is
past.
that a motion?
That's my motion.
But that's the thing, is I just want to put that, he's a designer, he's not the constructor. Designers do not know how much the
Of
construction
course
is.
they do.
Okay,
Of
guys.
course artists know
let's-
how much it
let's-
costs.
I second that. That makes sense to me.
Okay. So we just have a motion and a second for that resolution. Further discussion? Not really further discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Can I ask one clarifying question, please? Just for staff direction. If we go that route and try to get it under, if we're unable to, would you like us to bring it back, or can we proceed with an RFP?
Proceed.
Yes, proceed with the RFP then, I would say.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have our marijuana person?
Just walk in the door.
Okay.
Perfect timing.
Got another guy too coming. Just go to the bathroom.
We did,
I don't have your name on here, I don't think. Otherwise, marijuana person probably wasn't
The company
appropriate.
name or the
Your name.
Justin Street?
Thanks, Justin.
we're moving faster tonight.
Yeah.
Are you ready, James?
I'm ready.
Okay, kick, kick it.
This is a public hearing and first reading of an ordinance on an application submitted by 175 Midland Avenue, Unit 10 LLC, for a special review for a medical marijuana center at 175 Midland Avenue, which is the Sawtooth building that we have here on the screen. The applicant has proposed the medical marijuana center to be on the first floor of the building facing Midland Avenue. As background, the applicants received special review approval for a medical marijuana center in 2017, as well as a code amendment to allow for a medical marijuana center to be a community vitality use, which allows for it to front onto Midland Avenue. But the applicants did not pursue installing the medical marijuana center and failed to file their special review site plan. So due to the ordinance language related to the approval, it was determined that their approval was void. So the applicants have now submitted a application, again, the very same application that they received approval for in 2017. In evaluating the application, staff believes that the applicant satisfies the requirements of Town Code Section 16190, which is in your packet, and it's the code section that relates to medical marijuana centers and stores, provided that the conditions of approval that are in your draft ordinance are adhered to. And specifically, the requirements are that marijuana accessories and paraphernalia in the product cannot be visible from the adjacent public sidewalk, that the signage be limited to one sign of not more than 6 square feet, that there be no use of the product or testing allowed in the facility, and that there cannot be any cultivation on the site. And then finally, that they must obtain a state license prior to operating the proposed use. As far as the conditions that are in your draft ordinance are concerned, they're the same conditions that were approved in 2017. They include compliance with the sanitation district's requirements that they don't discharge chemicals or agricultural waste or product in the sanitary sewer, and that they comply with the fire district requirements for a fire extinguisher. There's also conditions related to them filing the site plan for recording, which was not done last time. The applicant has provided a proposed site plan as part of the application this time around, so it shouldn't be too difficult to file the site plan. And then there's also a condition requiring that they have 3 years of vested rights, and they would have to open the business within 3 years to meet that code requirement. So staff would recommend taking applicant comments tonight. We do have Justin Strebe and Kayla Crew with us this evening. They're the applicants. Then staff would suggest taking public comments and providing council discussion. If council is comfortable, you could approve the ordinance on first reading, continue and set the public hearing and second reading for February 12th. Guys, do you have additional comments for council?
When we were here a few weeks, about a month ago, here for the first reading for the first time, and James kind of did an explanation of why it's taken so long, sort of what happened the last time. And this was just kind of a clerical miss, I think, on our part, because after we had the approval, we got the licensing, all of our focus turned towards the state requirements that were we had to be associated with a cultivation facility in order to open a medicinal marijuana center. So all of our efforts went into that, and this was something that honestly just got completely overlooked and was brought up when it was time to renew the medical license. So since then, we actually do have our state Department of Revenue certification of marijuana medical center, so that's a huge achievement right there. And the state has also changed their regulations now. At the time that we were originally applying for this, we had to be associated with the cultivation facility. Effective July 1st of 2019, that is no longer a requirement. So we will be open by July 1st of 2019 without the necessity to be associated with a cultivation facility. But since all this started, we have been associated with a cultivation facility in Denver now, which is good because that means we already have the pipeline of products and everything ready to go for the July 1st opening. So at least the time was not lost. It's been quite a process, and we are at the end zone. So, as mentioned, this was really just kind of a clerical miss on our end, as our focus was applied towards the other necessities to get the final licensing.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any clarifying questions, or can I open the public hearing? Okay, this is public hearing, opened at 7:45. Is there anyone in the public who has any comments regarding this application? Hearing none, close the public hearing. Go to council. Comments, questions, motions?
Mayor, I move that town council approve ordinance number 4 on first reading and continue and set the second reading and public hearing for February 12th, 2019.
Second?
I did have a question, actually.
Can you second it?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Discussion?
Well, the question I had for you guys, though, I mean, again, with a competitor that's opened up across the street, and I think they have a medical license, or they sell to medical, and knowing what their experience is over the past year, are you sure that your business plan still holds up like it did in 2017? I mean, is this really something you want to move forward with? I mean,
Yeah, the very valid question. We obviously asked ourselves the same question when they did open across the street. Justin and I are entrepreneurs. Today is actually our 11-year anniversary of starting our own lighting business here in Basalt. So 11 years ago, we started out our own lighting design firm. Since then, we have built a company of 20-plus employees and $11 million of revenue based in Basalt, Colorado. We are business people, we are entrepreneurs, we have done plenty of due diligence. The cultivation facility that we are associated with in Denver, Colorado is Newt Brothers Artisanal. They were voted the best edible cannabis product in the state of Colorado last year. The facility itself that we are partnered in has in-house production, state-of-the-art, one of the most efficient facilities in the state of Colorado, which means our cost of production is far less than most other facilities. And in-house, we are producing every product that people request in a store. That's one facet of it. So we're actually offering a product that doesn't exist in the Valley. We've also done the market research to understand what the other people are doing, crowdsourcing to figure out what the issues are with those facilities, including Roaring Fork Wellness up the street and the station across the street. The other factor, obviously, is from a local standpoint. We have our own goals and models and rewards programs that we've implemented in our other businesses that we will carry over to this business to help, again, with the name Good People, emphasize the good people of Basalt. We're not somebody from Boulder opening a business in Basalt, we're locals opening a business in Basalt.
That was a wow answer.
We know it's a risk, but we feel like we have a good marketing plan to go with it, so.
Thanks for sticking with Basalt and for employing people in Basalt. That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, anybody else? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain?
I abstained on the original one, so.
Oh, good job, good memory. Okay, thanks guys for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, James.
Okay, next item is affordable housing update for council. Ryan J. Mahoney. What is your middle name?
Jay?
I just made that up.
No, it's
Ryan
E for Eskridge. It was the
Estridge?
last name. No, not Estridge. Eskridge.
Eskridge. Okay,
Let the
Ryan
record
E.
show.
Yes.
for it, Ryan.
Argue with my mother about that one.
Somebody's grandmother's maiden name, I know that.
Something along
Anyway.
Okay, so before you tonight, you have some different information about our affordable housing, and I wanted to make sure I thanked Christy Hamrick and Matt Wagner for their hard work in getting this all pulled together. So as a little bit of background, when I first arrived here, I had heard from council that you all wanted some information on our affordable housing. We had a line of credit on it. To date, that's approximately $1.7 million. We'll hear that again tonight. As well as, you know, what does the program look like? What kind of effort are we putting into this? What are our expenses on it? We just didn't really have a great grasp of that. And so I had asked Matt to start taking stock of the time spent by our public works folks who are managing all of our units, and we have about a year's worth of data on that. And so that's what is reflected on this spreadsheet. And Christy and Matt did a lot of work to pull this together. So I'm going to let Christy in a moment talk about some of the finance side of things, but just for reference, we have, or are soon to have, a total of 19 affordable housing units. They're spread throughout Basalt, from Willits to Old Town, and then there are 6 units that we have up in the Old Snowmass area. They all have, sort of varying characteristics. We have some 1 bedrooms, some 2 bedrooms, and our most recent acquisitions include 2 3 bedrooms. Those were the 2 Willits units in Block 7. If you look through the spreadsheet here, you can see too that there are different costs associated with them. We have some HOA dues that we pay at most locations, and we have utilities vary throughout as to what we might pay in a given unit versus what might be covered by the HOA fees. And so we didn't go into great detail about, who pays what and what the HOA covers, but we have basically all of that information at least captured into this spreadsheet you see here. The staffing, as you move down, there was a note C that was added on here. So we basically took all of the estimated staffing time that included public works. It included the collection of rents by office staff here, pretty much everything we could figure, and we spread that out across the units according to square footage. Thought that was a pretty fair way to make that assumption. Another thing to note here is the specific maintenance this year. So note B talks about the fact that these will vary from year to year. So for example, there was a high cost in the unit that I live in the first year, in that the flooring, there was old carpet in there, and then that got replaced to a laminate type flooring. So that's a one-time cost there. And in the over in the quad, I believe it was, and Boyd can chime in if I'm wrong about this, but we had to replace a boiler, I believe it was. So while these represent the costs just over 2018 for the specific units, we think that it's likely that each year, especially with this number of units and the age of some of the units, you're going to have ongoing maintenance costs. So it may fluctuate a little bit throughout there. And then the moving down the spreadsheet a bit, and hopefully I'm not jumping too far into what Christy was going to discuss with us, but we get down to the brass tacks and look at the total expenses. So that's a couple lines up from the bottom there. So our total expenses are about $171,000. Those are the direct expenses, and then of course we have interest that we pay, which is $67,000. So that's a total of about $239,000 annually. And then if we subtract out the principal repayment that we have for $227,000 in this year, we are at about $190,000 in the red for the year on this spreadsheet. So let me stop there and just make sure that I qualified that correctly, and then we would talk to you all about some recommendations we have. But
Yeah,
Christy?
and just the only thing I'll add is this doesn't include any permit fees for affordable housing, which are separate from this analysis. This is more of a looking at the actual operational costs and plus the impact of on principal and interest on our line of credit only, those two items.
Quick question, what category?
Well, James, I might ask you to help support me on this answer, but because these ones we have a separate policy on these versus the policy that would govern like the deed restriction that we just heard about. So there's a number of these that aren't deed restricted. Some of them do come with deed restrictions, like the ones that are in the Willets. James, are they actually categorized?
What's the equation?
Well, of the units that the town owns, the BC building units across the way here in Ute Center, they have RO deed restrictions with an appreciation cap on them. And then the other units that have deed restrictions that the town owns, the one in Basalt Commercial Park is actually a Category 3 unit. And then the Willets units don't have a deed restriction on them. And then the rest of the units we have don't have a deed restriction. We do have a policy, though, that as town-owned units, we rent them out at first priority at a Category 2 level.
Okay.
And no deed restriction on the Willets unit?
No.
Sorry, I was mistaken.
That's okay.
But the residents who live in these need to meet Category 2 requirements?
Yes, we look at them for Category 2.
Is an easy way to kind of make as a general overall blanket statement.
That's pretty general,
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's, we created that policy.
Right.
That was a policy we created not too long ago, but, okay.
Unless they're town
Sorry.
employees, and then if they're town employees, we have the ability to look at higher.
Okay.
Okay. Christie?
Yeah.
Will you continue on?
You're doing a great job. I'll just let you continue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then when we get to the back page, that's just something else, so.
Okay, great. So one of the things that we were looking at from a staff perspective, and I believe we have taken some cues from council, is as we're operating in the red currently, is there a way to get our affordable housing infrastructure into such a place where we could be making money on it and have an affordable housing program that might work and actually make money each year? And so we did go through a scenario where we believe that could work for us. One of the sets of units we have are in Snowmass. And one of the things that we hear from a staff perspective as it relates to those is that they're 15 minutes, 20 minutes up the road from the town. And as far as maintenance on them, which it does require quite a bit of maintenance. It is 7 acres, it's irrigated. There are big driveways that we need to plow. And so we're sending an employee and a vehicle up there every time it snows, first thing for those folks to be able to get out. The other thing about those units is just the location. I think the location is attractive to some because it's sort of a more rural setting. But as we kind of talked about tonight, one of the advantages of affordable housing is proximity to transit. And in this case, you'd have to walk down the road. I think there is a bus stop at the old Snowmass, but you're probably a mile plus away from that. So, and there's no bike lane along there or trail that you could take. So, so along those lines, they may not meet those requirements. So we did look at the sale of those units potentially and what that might mean for ultimately a bottom line with regard to an affordable housing program. So I might let Christie talk a little bit about the revenue and expenses side of it, but ultimately what we discovered is if we were able to divest ourselves of some units, we could operate this program in the black. We could actually be making money each year and setting that money aside, albeit it's not a great deal of money, but it's real money that over a few years could grow. And then if we use the Basalt Vista project as an example, where we did help pay for some of that with water taps and fees and things, that we've got a pot of money to help contribute to that. And it does seem that a program like that, where you had different government entities coming in to participate to solve an issue, may be a good strategy for any future affordable housing development. And so with that, Chrissy, will you just talk a little bit about sort of how we arrived at the numbers we did?
Yeah. On the first page with all of the detail on it, Matt and I went through the general ledger, and literally anything that we could code to a unit we did, specifically for under specific maintenance. Matt had done a lot of work on looking at actual hours spent. We believe that those hours are grossly misunderstated. Misunderstated, I don't know if that's a word, but that's what they were.
It was used by a president, so.
Oh, okay. Boy, I need to aspire to greatness here. So anyway, so we thought like a 3/4 FTE as an estimate would be a reasonable estimate for, looking at an average of a 3/4 FTE for an average salary. And the other thing, just to note on the line of credit piece, is that if we pay back that line of credit at $150,000 a year, that will take us 11 more years to repay. Just so you know that this isn't something that's in 2 or 3 years that we're gonna be able to reduce unless we come up with a big sum of money to do that. So that was one of the things that that we discovered in this analysis as well. So when you look at the second page with just taking the Shiny Mountain expenditures out of there and the interest costs and the principal costs in there, and also still excluding anything that we would get on building permits, which is above and beyond, just looking at operationally, that we would be able to retain $81,000 a year potentially. For affordable housing, for whatever we want to do for that program. So
Shining Mountain is Snowmass?
correct.
One other thing to keep in mind too is we looked at the opportunity cost for having this debt on our books. So this year we talked about that during the budget season, and we have to show this $1.7 million as if we're going to pay it off. So are we having a de facto reduction of service in the sense that we're not doing some deferred maintenance items? Auden's been beating the drum of, hey, what do we do with this building? Can we make some improvements in it? Or are there some street projects that we put off because of those revenue constraints? And so, I think that having this debt off our books and then actually having a program that operates and is making money, I think, ends up being a net, that we have.
Councilor Tannenbaum has a question.
Well, it's not a question as much as the original, when we were doing the RMI building, we were struggling on how to deal with the affordable housing issue. Because, should we have them pay a fee or develop affordable housing? And, this kind of came as the affordable housing mitigation. But it was never specifically said that we would keep it. So, I don't remember, that's why I'm looking at Susan, I don't remember we ever said we would not sell it during the deliberations.
I don't remember ever addressing it at all.
Okay, we just kind of kept it blank. So, for me, the reality was, we would use it in the best way we can. And, I through this whole discussion, I think it is prudent of us, especially, coming into the spring selling season, to make a decision to potentially sell these units and give the employees that are there significant period of time to go find another unit. But my personal belief on this is to sell those units. Let's figure out how to go and, you know, let's hopefully we get a decent price this summer. And, you know, then if, we'll come back with a spreadsheet and see where we're at, and then we can have a bigger discussion on what do we do with the rest. But, you know, I was here when we approved the line of credit, and, you know, I don't think I was as clear in my head about how long it would take to pay that line of credit off. I think personally, for me, I felt the line of credit would be paid off sooner because of the fact that we would get a significant amount of income from these properties. And, you know, we never did a type of spreadsheet like that to really show us what the costs and everything else were. So my goal would be to reduce that debt sooner than later.
Yeah, I agree with Gary. I guess the one thing is, I don't see why we would waste any time at least getting an appraisal and listing it. And if we don't sell it till the summer, that's great, but I just feel like a buyer might be out there, and it's gonna be a more narrow market because it's, you know, it doesn't fit with a lot of people's idea of what affordable housing or worker housing should be. So I don't think we're gonna have the market that we would have if we were at Willits, say. So I would like to try to.
Scraped.
Oh, it's a scraper, okay.
Well, this is a scraper, and so, someone who's gonna buy this lot in Snowmass is gonna buy it and build a single-family residence on this lot.
Yeah.
And they'll have to go through the Picken County community, and they'll have to do community development. But
Yeah, I think all the more reason to list it sooner rather than later, because if somebody wants to buy it for a single family, they're gonna wanna get going. By the time summer comes, then they're talking about the next year, probably.
I just worry about the people that are there now.
Well, we can list it, that's all the more reason to list it too, because, you know, that's fair warning.
One of the things that staff has done, we did have an appraisal on it back in 2014. And we've asked the appraiser to update that appraisal, so you all will have that in your hand in mid-February. So we'll have a clearer view of what we might be looking at there. One other thing to mention as well is we did have Bach go through the affordable housing program, and they did make a recommendation, and I was gonna ask Susan to just talk about the recommendation. I wasn't able to attend that meeting, so.
Well, there were 2 points. One is they were recommending to get rid of the Snowmass units because they felt that it didn't represent what the goals and the policies of the town of Basalt, and that we needed to walk the walk and keep our affordable housing in the urban growth boundaries. So they felt strongly about that, but they were hopeful that we could retain the units as affordable housing. They could see on the list who was kind of living in the units, and they were hoping that we could offer them first up to other units of local government or special districts to see if they could purchase them and keep them as workforce housing.
And
Well,
deed restrict them?
I think we should talk about that, but I mean, I think we want the biggest bang for the buck we can get, which is probably gonna be what Gary's talking about. You were up and then you were up and you were up and everybody's up.
I'm on board. I really want to thank Matt and Christy and Ryan and Susan and James, everyone, for putting this together. Again, Gold Star, you are meeting our bullseye of what we have been asking for, and it's so satisfying. And so I hope that you feel satisfied as well. Thank you. Yeah, kudos. I'm on board with selling the old Snowmass units. And I wanted to go back to our earlier conversation about Category 2. And Susan, did I hear you mention that a Category 2 rent would be $1,634?
Yeah, it's on your second sheet there where you have the 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom, and this old Snowmass, we were talking about 1-bedroom before, the old Snowmass units are 2-bedroom units.
So one thing that I want to bring up, here I am the Grinch, but why are our rent incomes, why are they not adjusted to what the Category 2 rents are? We are receiving, what was the word that, gross
Oh. I don't remember. It was a one-time misunderstatement.
Yeah.
Understatement, thank you,
Yes,
yes.
but we're not receiving the rents for what the categories are, and I'm not suggesting that we should make,
We not?
no, because
No.
estimated,
She's correct on that.
so I'd like to put I'd like to give the direction out there that we need to adjust the rents appropriately to what category 2 rates are, because again, we gotta walk our walk, and we're not doing category 2, we're more in the, which, I mean, kudos to us, we're meeting more, around the 61 to 80% of AMI or category, I don't know what category it is, but if we want to balance the budget, this is another way. And this is a way to,
Fair, right?
yes, and it's still very fair, and it's a way for us to recoup that 3/4 full-time employee.
Okay, it was either Bill or Auden first, who had it?
Yeah, you go.
Okay, I also want to thank you, Christie. This is really some great analysis. But it's also really clear that most of the properties would be revenue positive or profit positive if we didn't have the amortization of debt. So getting rid of the debt is a real big thing, which gets back to the 2014 assessment of the Shining Mountain properties. What was the estimated value on the properties in 2014?
1.2 million.
Okay, so we're close.
Yeah, we're not
So
too far off, and I think we've seen some gains in the real estate markets instead of 14.
So it's conceivable that we could retire all of the revolver that we're going to talk about pretty soon anyway, which makes sense. I had a follow-on question for Jeff, and it comes back to do we have any obligation to the existing tenants of the Shining Mountain properties if we sell the properties?
In terms of,
Anything whatsoever?
You
Is
know-
there any recourse they would have to?
we'd have to
in-
review the leases on each of those properties in terms of their termination provisions on the leases, but as far as like a right to additional affordable housing.
Right. And they would not be entitled to any kind of compensation from us for having sold the property, notwithstanding what the buyer's intentions may or may not be.
We will review that whole bundle of issues to make sure,
Okay.
but I don't think so.
Just being conscious of who some of the occupants are. If we've had friction before, we'll probably have friction again.
Sure.
And we do have a few leases out there that are coming to a close. They were within 6 months or so.
Okay.
We do have one town employee out there, and I've been regularly informing her of because the appraisal was out there, and she was asking about that. So I just have been kind of keeping her abreast of timing as best I could. I think there's been others out there as well that kind of know that council would be having a discussion, and so this wouldn't be news to them at this point, but nonetheless, I think, I can't remember who made the comment about the timing piece of it, and not just 2 weeks and you're out. We kind of think that one through a little bit, and we would do that.
Got it.
And normally, I mean, I own rental property since I was 2. A lot of times, I mean, that doesn't sound like it's the case, but a lot of times the owner is a landlord as well, and it's not really our problem.
Yeah.
So,
So, I'm sorry, Gary, I missed, you were saying sell them for as much as you can,
Yeah.
and then do something good with them.
Well, just retire this debt.
Retire the debt, and what is the total number of the debt?
Like 1.7. Yeah.
1.7, but these units they're not gonna cover that debt.
Well, they were assessed at 1.2 in 2014.
Oh, the total?
Property.
Yeah.
Okay,
You don't have to, I mean, my whole goal was to sell this property, because when we did the RMI deal, they were trying to offset their affordable housing mitigation for the commercial. And the way they did it was just deeding that property to the
Got it.
town. So I just want to sell it.
and you're okay not deed restricting it and doing affordable, because you wanna till it into the program?
Correct.
Okay. Jen, I just wanna understand where you're coming from you're saying we're undercharging on the rent?
Correct. I just did back of the envelope. We're losing out on $132,000.
But didn't you just argue that we have too many Cat 2? And now you're arguing that we should move up to Cat 2?
I'm saying that if we're advertising, if we're in the packet, we're saying that it's category 2, then we need to be charging category 2. Otherwise, we need to wave our flag and say,
Downgrade.
hey, we're doing category 4.
Okay.
But if we are going to be doing category 2, just quick at the back of the envelope, it's $132,000 a year if we increased what our current holdings are to category 2.
So, okay.
We might need to review that.
Yeah, we
That's
do.
another issue, but a very good one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, whoever's turn it is, are we done?
We
That,
need to-
I think that's basically the information that we have for you, and we were, you know, as I said, there is an appraisal update that's occurring, so we can come back to you once we have that information. Excuse me, and if there's any further direction from council, we'd love to hear that from you.
Is there further specific direction,
Well,
please?
isn't our direction consensus to sell those units?
Is that a motion?
I make a motion that, well, do we need a motion? Because you're
You-
gonna come
you've
back
pro-
to us.
We'll come back. You've provided direction. We're gonna
Yeah.
pursue what it would take to sell
We'll
those
get the
units.
appraisal and then,
Okay.
assuming it's north of whatever it was appraised at in 2014, we'll put them up for
Have some money,
sale
right,
as soon as possible.
okay.
Along with
Excellent.
considering adjusting the,
Well, that's a policy.
You guys, can we really just sort of like ask for the floor and maybe stop with the conversations across the table? Our next item is,
Madam Mayor?
yes,
Just,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to answer that question about the rents, that obviously, as people, have rents, we can't adjust mid-rent, but,
right.
that's something that we can, look at. Now, it may differ for, when there's town and assault, employees in them, and so we may wanna consider that, and, you know, we anticipate, as we move into the future, that, we could, you know, have challenges recruiting and retaining employees if they're having to pay, you know, too much. But, you know, trying to find a nice balance there for our employees, I think is a good incentive, so.
Yeah. 4 out of 18 is town of Basalt.
okay, next item is ordinance 5 of 2019, an ordinance of the town authorizing borrowing on a line of credit for the purpose of purchasing affordable housing. Christie.
Yeah. So, this is just a continuance of the line of credit for the next calendar year, 2019. I've been working with Lonnie Ruiz at Alpine Bank, and he had his attorney draft some information on the loan agreement, and then we drafted, me and Jeff drafted the ordinance. And everybody is in agreement of that, and it's just pretty much continuing that line of credit for the next year at 4.25%, which is actually really a great rate for right now, because Uwani was able to lock that in right before we had the additional 0.25% interest rate. So that was kudos to him for working with the town on that piece.
Questions for Christie?
Mayor, I move
Thank you.
that the town council adopt ordinance number 05, series of 2019 on first reading, and set the public hearing and second reading for February 12, 2019.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. This next one is public hearing and second reading of ordinance 2, an ordinance of the town approving water rate charges pursuant to section 1347 of the town code. A second reading, did I say that? It's second reading, okay.
So, Madam Mayor, as I discussed at the last meeting when we first heard these were just setting the charges for the water rates. This is more or less a housekeeping issue. We had adopted these new charges in the 2018 budget, and we're reflecting those in the code.
Questions? Motions?
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 2, series of 2019 on second reading.
That sounds like Mother May I. almost. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good. Public hearing, second reading of ordinance 3, an ordinance of the town of Basalt, amending chapter 11, article 3, excavations of the Muni Code to enact an additional condition that may be imposed on the work performed under a street excavation permit in order to promote deployment of telecommunication resources, one dig. And this is a second also, Ryan.
Probably the most exciting agenda item of the evening, I would say.
I know it really makes Auden excited. I've seen him nod off during this one.
So actually, there are two items before you. So one is a resolution and one is an ordinance. The resolution actually authorizes the execution of a memorandum of agreement that we would have between the town and Cedar Networks that is concerning the installation of the shadow conduit. And then the ordinance itself actually modifies our town code, which would give both the Public Works Director and the town manager the ability to require the installation of this shadow conduit. So what that means in English is that we basically can start to build out a conduit network for now. When we have open trench excavating, when new subdivisions come in, or if, say for example, we get to redo the Main Street or Basalt Avenue, Midland Avenue, goodness, third time's a charm, that we'd want to make sure that we're building out this network. One of those pieces of conduit would go to the town, would be for our use, for whatever future use we might have, and the other would be for Cedar Networks to be able to pull fiber optic through. So they are trying to build out a network throughout town, and they are in the valley and actually building a redundancy to get out of the valley. You remember a few years ago when the line was cut and everybody lost internet access. Well, this would help with that. So that redundancy is a good thing over time. It also does check one of the boxes that we have in our strategic plan, which talks about access to high-speed internet. And so I think this is good for business development as well as not getting too frustrated as homeowners when we don't have internet access. So anyways, that's it.
Jeff, do you want us to do these separately?
Yes.
Okay, so if there's a motion on the first one, unless there's questions?
Mayor, I move that the town council.
Oh, it is a public hearing.
Oh.
Sorry.
This is a public hearing, believe it or not, so we're gonna open the public hearing at 8:20. Any comments? No comments? Close the public hearing. Okay.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 3, series of 2019 on second reading.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good.
Thank you for this initiative.
Mhm.
It is impossible
It's
to do
great.
business if you can't connect, and that is often my experience.
Okay,
That worked out.
this is a resolution, number 1 of 2019, a resolution of the town approving and authorizing the execution of a memorandum of agreement with Cedar Networks concerning the donation and installation of shadow conduit. Ryan, again.
Don't make them.
I believe I already
Okay, never mind. Okay, is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve resolution number 1, series of 19.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, is there a motion to,
Mayor, I move that town council enter executive session for a conference with their attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions in accordance with CRS 246402-4B. More specifically, to discuss Tabor and the Ted Guy suit?
Yes.
So Tabor
Okay.
restrictions and the Ted Guy versus Town of Basalt.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we need,
We just need
we just need to shut her down.